"Dad, it is time for you to move out. Sunny Pines has an open bed, and we need you to take it." The words hit the crisp morning air like a lead weight, shattering the quiet, comfortable hum of that Sunday morning. I stopped wiping the kitchen counter. I looked across the kitchen island, my eyes narrowing slightly. There sat my 44-year-old son, Bradley, casually chewing on a piece of greasy bacon. It was a ceramic mug I had bought for her last Christmas, painted with delicate winter pines. It was a calculating, predatory smirk that told me everything I needed to know in a single second. They had planned this, but what they did not know was that I was not the helpless, clueless, frail old man they assumed I was. They would lose every single piece of luxury furniture they had surrounded themselves with, and they would lose everything they thought they had successfully stolen from me. Let me take you back to the exact moment my own flesh and blood decided I was just an inconvenient expiration date standing in the way of his superficial happiness. I stood there in the center of the kitchen, the damp dish towel gripped tightly in my rough hands. The room was flooded with the warm golden Texas morning light. 40 years ago, when the Austin real estate market was nothing but dirt, tumbleweeds, and empty fields, my late wife Sarah and I bought this 1-acre plot of land. I was a general contractor. I poured the concrete foundation myself, spending blistering summer days baking under the unforgiving sun. Sarah loved this kitchen. I built the custom mahogany cabinets exactly to her height. Sarah and I used to sit on the subfloor of this very room, eating cheap takeout pizza from a greasy cardboard box, imagining the sound of our future children running down the wide hallways. I built this house to be a sanctuary, a mid-level corporate middle management paper pusher who could not even change a flat tire or fix a leaky faucet, sitting in the absolute heart of my life's work, telling me it was time to leave. "I think it is for the best, Dad," Bradley added, finally setting his smartphone face down on the granite island. He adopted that fake, agonizingly slow tone of voice that people usually reserve for talking to toddlers or the terminally ill. "You have been getting a little forgetful lately. Last week, you left the porch light on all night. It is becoming a safety hazard. We just want you to be safe, Richard," Megan chimed in, leaning forward so that her stack of designer gold bracelets clinked loudly against the stone counter. "Sunny Pines is a facility. They have round-the-clock care. You will be around people your own age, and you will not have to worry about maintaining this big old house anymore. It is just too much work for someone your age. Safety. Just 3 years ago, I had spent 2 grueling weeks rewiring the entire electrical system of this house to meet modern commercial safety codes. I had even replaced the old gas stove with a high-end induction cooktop that automatically shuts off the exact second a pan is removed, specifically, so there would never be a fire hazard in my kitchen." Forgetful? They had been evicted from their luxury high-rise apartment downtown because they could no longer afford the exorbitant rent. They were drowning in luxury car payments and suffocating under the crushing weight of a lifestyle they could not afford to maintain. I opened my doors to them without a single moment of hesitation. I gave them the entire second floor of the house. I let them live rent-free so they could get back on their feet and rebuild their lives. But as the months turned into years, their initial gratitude vanished. They systematically took over the formal living room. They started hosting lavish, pretentious dinner parties for their superficial, wealthy Austin friends, politely asking me to stay upstairs in my bedroom so I would not embarrass them with my old flannel shirts, my calloused hands, and my scuffed work boots. They did not want me safe. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it burned a hole right through the center of my chest. A weaker man might have broken down and cried. "You patiently assess the structure. You plan the demolition." I let my shoulders slump forward. I looked down at my worn-out leather slippers, playing the role they had written for me to absolute perfection. "Maybe you are right," I whispered, forcing my voice to sound frail, gravelly, and defeated. "The house is getting a bit too much for me to handle. I just need some time to think about it." The relief that immediately washed over their faces was instantaneous, and Megan actually clapped her hands together, a short, irritating sound of total victory. "Of course, Dad," Bradley said, standing up and patting my shoulder awkwardly, exactly as if he had just successfully won a difficult corporate negotiation. "Take the weekend to process it. But we really need a firm answer by Monday morning so we can secure the bed at the facility before someone else takes it." They turned back to their breakfast, their cruel mission successfully accomplished. I dragged my feet, physically selling the heartbreaking illusion of a broken, discarded old man. But as I passed the mahogany entryway table, my eyes locked onto Megan's imported leather purse. The corner of the legal document was visible, bearing the raised seal of a local notary public and a few words printed in bold black ink. Words that made the blood freeze in my veins. I kept shuffling down the hallway toward my quiet bedroom. The war had just begun, and I was going to demolish them. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring blankly at the hardwood floorboards, letting the seething anger settle into a hard, razor focus. It was Bradley. He walked over and laid it gently on my nightstand as if he were presenting me with a gift. It read Sunny Pines Nursing Home in bright, cheerful, insulting letters. He sat next to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Dad, I know this is a lot to take in," he said softly, playing the role of the concerned son. "But you have to understand, Megan and I are just worried about you. You have been getting so forgetful lately. Last week, you left the stove on. You forgot to lock the front door twice. It is just becoming too dangerous for you to be alone in this big house when we are at work. We love you too much to let something terrible happen to you." I looked down at the cheap brochure and then up at my son. "Forgetful? I am a retired general contractor. I still do advanced structural calculus in my head just to keep my brain healthy. As for the stove, I replaced the old gas unit with an induction cooktop 3 years ago. I personally installed a smart biometric lock system that automatically engages after 60 seconds. He never paid attention to the house unless something was broken, and he needed me to fix it for him. The brutal truth had nothing to do with my safety or my memory. 4 years ago, they came to me broke, drowning in debt, and begging for a roof over their heads. They wanted to eagerly play the role of rich, sophisticated hosts to their new circle of wealthy Austin friends. An old man in flannel shirts and scuffed work boots, walking through the living room, ruined the illusion of their perfect, self-made success. They wanted to erase me from the picture. I forced my hands to shake. I looked at Bradley with wide, frightened eyes, playing the part of the helpless senior citizen they so needed me to be. "Is it nice there?" I asked, keeping my voice small, wavering, and to fully sell the performance. "It is wonderful, Dad." Bradley smiled broadly, clearly relieved that I was not putting up a fight or arguing with him. "They have a garden. They have a piano in the common room. You will make so many friends your own age. Just look over the brochure today. We can talk more about the transition tonight when we get home." He patted my knee, stood up, and walked out of the room, closing the door behind him. The moment the latch clicked into place, my trembling hands went still. I needed a battle plan. I waited in my room until I finally heard the thud of the garage door closing. The house fell into a deep, hollow silence. Now it was my turn to work. If they were planning to put me away and take over my home, I needed to make sure all my legal documents were secure and untouchable. I needed to review the exact wording of the title to ensure there were no hidden loopholes Bradley could try to exploit with a shady, desperate lawyer. I stepped out of my bedroom and walked down the long, sunlit hallway. The floorboards creaked under my weight, a familiar, comforting sound I had known for over 40 years. It was my private space, a room Megan rarely ever entered because she constantly claimed it smelled too much like old paper and cedarwood. I turned the knob, fully expecting the oak door to swing open easily. I frowned, confused, and tried again, putting my weight into my shoulder and pushing against the solid wood. As I leaned closer to inspect the hardware, my blood ran. I realized the old standard doorknob had been removed. My own study, the room containing all of my most private financial and personal documents, had been sealed off from me. I stood there in the quiet hallway, staring at the shiny new brass lock, and realization washed over me. This was no longer just an eviction. The sheer audacity to change a lock inside my own home, a home I built with my bare hands, ignited a fire inside me that had not burned this hot in decades. I traced my fingers over the metal of the new deadbolt. They thought I would just pack my bags, hand over the keys, and fade away into a sterile nursing home room. It was a dark, humorless smile. Bradley had forgotten one very important detail. about the father he was trying to discard, and I knew exactly where I kept my duty tools. I stood there, my hand resting on the brass of the new deadbolt. This study was the nerve center of my life. Now I was locked out. A floorboard creaked loudly behind me. "Richard, what are you doing?" I turned. Megan stood at the end of the hallway wearing a silk robe and holding a steaming cup of herbal tea. She glided down the hallway, her bare feet padding softly against the oak floor. I pointed a trembling finger at the door. "I was just trying to get some old tax papers," I said, keeping my voice hesitant and weak. "But the knob does not seem to want to turn. Did the lock break?" Her touch felt like absolute ice. "Oh, Richard, I am so sorry. I turned this room into my private yoga studio. I really needed a zen space to meditate. You know how stressful things have been for Bradley and me lately." A yoga studio. Megan did not do yoga. It faced the afternoon sun directly, turning into a sweltering oven by 3 o'clock, and my mahogany desk dominated the entire floor space. "But what about my papers?" I asked, widening my eyes to look distressed. "My ledgers? The filing cabinets?" "Oh, do not worry about that," she said breezily, taking a casual sip of her tea. "I had Bradley pack those dusty old boxes and moved them down to the basement. You do not really need to worry about all that complicated financial stuff anymore. You should be relaxing. We have everything handled." Her lie about the basement was the fatal flaw in her ridiculous story. Megan knew this. She claimed she saw a spider down there 3 years ago and refused to set foot on the stairs ever since. My papers were still in that room, and she was guarding them. I nodded, looking down at the floor as if I were too tired to argue. "I understand, Megan, a zen space sounds nice. I will just go rest in my room." She patted my arm, her smile widening into a triumphant grin. "Good idea, Richard. Rest up. Bradley and I are going out tonight. We have a dinner party with some wealthy investors from his firm. We will be out quite late, so do not wait up for us. I left some soup in the fridge for your dinner." She turned and walked away. Investors from his firm? They were going to a pretentious country club, trying to impress people who did not care about them, all while plotting to steal the ground beneath my feet. I went back to my bedroom and sat in the worn armchair by the window. I listened to the sounds of the house. Time moved, but every tick of the clock was another second closer to uncovering the brutal truth. Finally, at 7 o'clock, I heard them coming down the stairs. The house was finally empty. It was charged with anticipation. I stood up, my posture straightened, and my broad shoulders pulled back. And I was about to break into my own study. I headed straight for the mudroom at the back of the house. It was battered, scratched, and covered in dried paint from decades of hard labor. I stopped in front of the study. The shiny new brass deadbolt gleamed in the dim hallway light, silently mocking me. She thought a simple locked door was enough to hide their dirty secrets. I set the toolbox down. I looked at the locked door. Now it was my turn to see exactly what they were hiding behind this door. My hands moved with a familiar, practiced rhythm. I slid the tension wrench into the bottom of the keyway, applying just a feather-light amount of rotational pressure. I counted them off in my head, feeling the microscopic clicks vibrate through the metal tools and into my fingertips. But a cheap deadbolt from a discount hardware store is nothing more than an illusion of security against a man who knows exactly how it was manufactured. Exactly 45 seconds after I knelt down, the final pin set firmly into place. I stepped the threshold, my eyes adjusting to the dim light, filtering through the closed wooden blinds. The brass desk lamp flickered to life, casting a warm yellow glow across the room. I stood frozen in the doorway for a long moment, taking in the sheer, unadulterated disrespect laid bare before me. There were no meditation cushions, no incense burners, no signs of a peaceful Zen sanctuary whatsoever. My mahogany desk, a piece of furniture I had personally salvaged and restored by hand decades ago, was covered in a mountain of scattered documents, empty coffee mugs, and crumpled-up legal pads. But the sight that made my stomach turn was located in the far corner of the room. The metal drawers were hanging wide open at crooked angles. My private tax returns, my old building permits, Sarah's medical records, and my retirement account statements were pulled from their neat folders and carelessly thrown across the floor like worthless trash. A wave of bitter, suffocating betrayal washed over me. I stopped in the center of the study, remembering a rainy Tuesday evening over 30 years ago. I had bought him a little green ledger and sat patiently beside him for 2 hours, teaching him exactly how to balance a checkbook. I had explained to him the vital value of a hard-earned dollar, the absolute importance of keeping his financial word, and the necessity of honest labor. I had believed with every fiber of my being that I was raising a man of integrity. Now, looking at the pride metal of my filing cabinets, that precious memory felt like a cruel, sick joke. It was not just an invasion of privacy, they had ransacked it with a frantic, greedy desperation. I forced myself to breathe evenly, pushing the emotional ache down and replacing it with the calculating mindset of a contractor assessing a severely damaged foundation. You do not destroy 2 steel filing cabinets unless you are hunting for a very particular hidden document. I began to sift through the mess on the desktop, moving aside the crumpled legal pads and old coffee rings. My heart skipped a beat, then immediately settled as I recognized the watermark. But the fact that Bradley had dug out the copy meant they were thoroughly researching the legal boundaries of my ownership. I placed the deed down and continued to search the immediate area. The emails were sent from Bradley's personal account, not his work email. It was a representative from a company called Apex Horizon Financial. I recognized the name immediately from my long years in the real estate business. They were a predatory lending company notorious for offering high-interest cash loans against property assets. You do not get that size loan without substantial collateral. Bradley had 0 assets. The luxury car belonged to a dealership. The only valuable asset was the house I was currently standing in. I read a highlighted paragraph midway down the second page. The loan officer wrote, "We cannot proceed with property leveraging unless Bradley is the primary title holder or possesses full legal authority over the current owner." My stomach clenched painfully as their scheme took a shape. They were trying to use my property as an ATM to fund their delusions. I dropped the emails onto the desk and opened the remaining drawers. I needed to see exactly how far my son was willing to go. I pulled open the bottom right drawer. It was full of legal folders. I grabbed the top folder and flipped it open under the desk lamp. Inside was a single document. The bold heading at the top read, "Durable Power of Attorney." My eyes scanned the dense legal jargon, picking out key phrases that felt like severe physical blows. It granted Bradley complete, absolute control over all of my financial assets, real estate holdings, banking accounts, and investment portfolios. It gave him the absolute right to make all healthcare decisions on my behalf, including the authority to place me in a long-term care facility against my will and the power to dictate my end-of-life care. This was not just a financial theft. They were drafting the paperwork to legally strip me of my voice, my freedom, and my basic human rights. Richard Caldwell. I stared at the ink in complete disbelief. Bradley had clearly tried to copy my signature from an old birthday card. It was a fake stamp, easily ordered online by anyone with a credit card. But I knew enough about the modern legal system to understand exactly how dangerous this piece of paper was. If Bradley walked into a busy bank branch or a predatory lending office with this document, a careless clerk might just process the request. Once the wheels of a financial transaction started turning, it would take me years of legal battles to prove the fraud and unravel the immense damage. It was the concrete proof of their absolute betrayal. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my smartphone. I took 3 high-resolution photos of the final page. I moved on to the printed emails, clearly capturing the dates, the sender addresses, and the detailed discussions about leveraging my home. I was building an ironclad legal case, brick by brick. I quickly reviewed the photos in my digital gallery, zooming in to make sure every single word was legible. I needed to put everything back exactly as I had found it. But before my fingers could even brush the cardboard cover, a low rumble vibrated through the floorboards. My heart slammed against my ribs. It did not matter. I had less than 30 seconds before they walked through the mudroom door. I moved with a speed and agility I did not know my 78-year-old body still possessed. I roughly swept the scattered bank statements and emails back into the chaotic pile they had originally created on the desktop. I stepped out into the hallway, pulling the oak door shut right behind me. I pulled the tension wrench and the hook pick from my pocket. I slid the tools into the new brass deadbolt. I heard the lock on the mudroom door click open. The mechanism caught. I turned the tension wrench, locking the deadbolt firmly into place. I pulled my tools out, just as I heard Megan complain loudly about her shoes. I stepped inside and eased my door shut, leaving it open just a crack. A second later, the hallway light clicked on, and footsteps echoed on the floors. I laid awake and listened to the muffled sounds of Bradley and Megan moving around the house, their voices unaware of the storm, gathering right beneath their feet. When morning finally broke, painting the wide Texas sky in shades of pale orange, I already had my script fully prepared. I cleared my throat, deliberately making my voice sound weak and raspy. Higgins downtown, Bradley barely glanced in my direction, tossing me a dismissive nod and telling me to make sure I take a taxi so I would not get lost. I agreed meekly, turning away to hide the fire burning brightly in my eyes. We were heading straight to the downtown law offices of Thomas Sterling. Thomas and I had known each other personally for over 40 years. Long before he wore custom-tailored suits and sat behind a mahogany desk, he was a scrappy young legal clerk who helped me navigate my complicated commercial construction contracts. If there was anyone I trusted to obliterate this betrayal, it was him. I walked into his downtown office without an appointment. I sat down in the leather chair opposite him. I pulled out my phone, unlocked the screen, opened the photo gallery, and slid the device directly across the polished wood of his desk. Thomas picked it up, adjusting his silver-rimmed reading glasses. I watched his eyes dart back and forth across the glowing screen. The silence in the executive office became broken only by the distant hum of the city traffic 14 floors below. When he finally reached the image of the forged signature and the fake notary stamp, a prominent vein in his temple throbbed. His voice, when he finally spoke, was dangerously quiet and laced with pure venom. "This is a Class 3 felony, Richard. It is textbook fraud, elder abuse, and a direct conspiracy to commit grand larceny. I can have a police cruiser sitting in your driveway in 15 minutes. We can have Bradley wearing handcuffs before his lunch break. Let me make the call." I leaned forward and placed my large, calloused hand firmly over his wrist, stopping his movement. "No, Thomas," I said, my voice steady and void of the weakness I had faked all morning. "Do not call the police, not yet." Thomas looked at me, his brow furrowed in deep confusion and rising anger. "Richard, he is trying to strip you of your legal autonomy. He is trying to steal $1 million property and lock you in a state-run facility against your will. You cannot protect him from this terrible consequence. He crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed by a simple apology." "I am not protecting him," I replied coldly, staring directly into the eyes of my oldest friend. "Jail is too easy for what he has deliberately done. If he goes to jail right now, he gets a cheap public defender. He cries to a sympathetic judge about making a foolish mistake. And Megan plays the weeping, innocent victim. They will paint me as a confused old man who misunderstood their noble intentions." I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "No, I want to take away the one thing they love in this world. I want to obliterate their money, their status, and their arrogance. I want to dismantle their life the exact same way they tried to dismantle mine." Thomas pulled his hand away from the receiver of the telephone. He knew me well enough to accurately recognize the tone of a man who was preparing to demolish a building right down to its foundation. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, his tone shifting from protective friend to strategic partner. I pointed to the phone on the desk. "You saw the emails from Apex Horizon Financial. Bradley is trying to leverage the house for a cash loan. But a man does not commit a brazen felony just to casually upgrade his lifestyle. There is a desperate, suffocating panic hidden in that forgery. They need an amount of cash, and they need it immediately. I need to know why." I leaned in closer. "I need you to run a quiet, deep background check on their finances. I want to see every single hidden bank account, every maxed-out credit card, and every unpaid debt they have been hiding from me. Find out exactly why they need my house so today." Thomas nodded firmly, turning to his computer monitors. His fingers began flying across the keyboard with speed. "Give me until this afternoon, Richard," he promised. "I will find their breaking point." I left Thomas and spent the next few hours sitting alone on a wooden bench in a nearby public park. I watched the vibrant city of Austin move around me, oblivious to the silent, devastating storm raging inside my chest. The afternoon sun beat down on the paved walkways, but I felt nothing but a numbness. At exactly 2 o'clock, my cell phone vibrated sharply in my pocket. It was a brief text message from Thomas. It contained only 2 simple words: "Come back." I stood up, smoothed the wrinkles from my jacket, and made the short walk back to his tall glass building. When I stepped into his private executive office for the second time that day, the atmosphere was different. Thomas was rubbing his temples vigorously with both hands, looking exactly like an exhausted man who had just sifted through the wreckage of a train derailment. He silently gestured for me to sit down in the leather chair. Thomas leaned forward, folding his hands tightly over a thick stack of printed papers. "Richard," he began softly, his voice with absolute disbelief. "I knew your son was living far beyond his actual means, but the harsh reality of his financial situation is significantly worse than either of us could have ever imagined." He slid a single crisp sheet of white paper across the smooth mahogany desk. I looked closely at the bold black number printed at the very bottom of the page: $140, Sauzone. This astronomical figure did not even include the leased luxury car currently sitting in my driveway, and it certainly did not include their regular daily living expenses. It was a mountain of financial ruin built on high-interest plastic cards and foolish delusions. "How is this even remotely possible?" I asked, my voice barely a strained whisper in the quiet room. "They live in my house rent-free. I pay the annual property taxes out of my own pocket. I pay all the utility bills every single month. Where did all of this money go?" Thomas began flipping quickly through the stacked pages, laying out the sordid, disgusting details of their hidden, desperate life. "Megan has a severe shopping addiction," he explained grimly, tapping a manicured finger against a lengthy credit card statement. "She has been treating high-end luxury boutiques like ordinary grocery stores. She is dropping thousands of dollars every single month on designer clothes, imported luxury handbags, and boutique salon treatments. She even secretly opened 3 credit accounts in her maiden name just to keep the invisible money flowing. But her spending habit is only half of this terrible disaster." Thomas pulled another official document from the messy pile. It was an employment verification record. Bradley was brutally demoted at his corporate firm over 8 months ago. He permanently lost his senior management title, and along with it, he lost nearly 40% of his annual salary. Instead of adjusting their lavish lifestyle or telling you the honest truth, they stubbornly doubled down. They used high-interest credit cards to cover the financial gap, pretending everything was fine, while they drowned in an inescapable sea of compounding interest and late fees. I sat back deep into the leather chair, feeling a mixture of utter disgust and sorrow. I drove a battered pickup truck with a rusted-out floorboard, because every single extra dollar went straight into buying structural lumber, nails, and pouring concrete. I physically bled into the dark soil of that property to ensure my family would never have to know the grip of poverty. Today, that very same plot of land is worth well over $1 million because of decades of brutal, unglamorous, relentless discipline. So he decided to sacrifice my peaceful future just to hide his own mistakes. "They are broke," Thomas stated flatly. "The credit card companies are preparing to file aggressive lawsuits. They are desperate animals, backed into a highly dangerous corner. But this is where the story goes from a tragic financial failure to a calculated criminal conspiracy." Thomas grabbed a different folder and pulled out a complex application. "Do you remember the printed emails you found from Apex Horizon Financial?" he asked. I nodded. Thomas pointed his pen directly at the 3rd paragraph. "The forged power of attorney is not just about medical decisions. Look right here." I leaned in and read the tiny print. Thomas tapped the application form with the gold barrel of his pen. "They are applying for a reverse mortgage, Richard," he explained, his tone laced with a mixture of professional disgust and personal outrage. I stared at him, letting the words sink fully into my mind. "It is a financial product specifically designed for senior citizens, allowing them to convert part of the equity in their homes into cash. The moment I am securely locked away in that cheap nursing home facility, declared legally incompetent by the very paperwork he falsified, He plans to execute this loan against my property. He slid a detailed amortization schedule across the desk so I could directly see the mathematics for myself. Your house is easily worth $1, $2 million in the current Austin real estate market, Thomas continued, pointing at the top line of the spreadsheet. Apex Horizon Financial is willing to offer a lump sum cash out of $600. Bradley and Megan plan to take that cash, wipe out their $140,000 of credit card debt, and pocket the remaining $460. They want to use the equity you built with your own bare hands to freely fund their lifestyle. They want to take vacations, buy new designer wardrobes, and continue to host those lavish dinner parties as if they were brilliant, self-made millionaires. I looked at the paperwork, a sickness firmly settling in the pit of my stomach as the final piece of their treacherous puzzle snapped into place. And what happens to the house? I asked, though I already knew the devastating answer. Thomas leaned back in his large leather chair and sighed, rubbing a hand across his tired face. The bank ultimately takes it, he replied, emphasizing the brutal reality of their scheme. Because Bradley has no intention of ever repaying a single dime of this loan. He cannot afford to. The interest will compound month after month, eating away at the remaining equity of the property while you are sitting alone in a sterile room at Sunny Pines. When you eventually pass away, or when the loan balance inevitably exceeds the total value of the home, Apex Horizon Financial will initiate a full, aggressive legal foreclosure. They will seize the property, evict anyone living there, and sell it to the highest bidder to recoup their losses. Bradley and Megan will walk away with $500,000 in stolen cash, leaving your entire life's legacy to be auctioned off by a predatory lender. They are treating your home like a disposable lottery ticket, discarding you the moment they secure their unearned jackpot. The sheer, unadulterated evil of their master plan echoed loudly through the quiet executive office. I closed my eyes and took a very long, deep breath. But sitting there, staring directly at the exact dollar amount he had placed on my personal freedom and my hard-earned legacy, that paralyzing heartbreak evaporated into thin air. It was instantly replaced by a hard and calm resolve. The man currently sleeping under my roof, eating the food I bought with my own money, and driving a luxury car while plotting my ultimate demise, was not the little boy I had patiently taught to balance a checkbook. He was a coward who refused to face the severe consequences of his own professional failures, choosing instead to sacrifice his father on the altar of his own vanity. I opened my eyes and looked directly at my friend. I was a professional builder. I did not need to see any more of his desperate lies. The rules of engagement had been clearly established by my own flesh and blood. He had severely underestimated the man who raised him. I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the polished mahogany desk, and locked my gaze with Thomas. I was a man preparing for absolute war. We are going to strike first, and we are going to strike hard. I need you to answer a very important question right now, I said, my voice steady and devoid of any remaining warmth or hesitation. How fast can we legally sell this property to a cash buyer before Wednesday? Thomas stared at me across the mahogany desk, his eyes narrowing into a squint before a genuine smile spread across his weathered face. And more importantly, he understood the sheer magnitude of the retaliation I was planning. It was a boiling cauldron of rapid corporate development. Thomas pulled his leather contact book from the corner of his desk. If you try to list it on the open market, it takes months, he said, his voice dropping low. But if you want to sell it today, with no contingencies and cash wired directly into a secure trust, we bypass families and go straight to the sharks. He flipped through the thick pages until he found a specific business card. He pulled it out and tapped it against the desk. Lone Star Horizon, he read aloud. They are a corporate real estate development firm. They have been buying up residential lots on your side of the city to demolish old homes and build luxury condominiums. They pay in cash. They buy properties strictly as is, meaning they do not care about the fresh paint, the plumbing, or the roof. They only want the dirt beneath the foundation. I leaned forward, the gears in my mind turning. A corporate buyer was perfect. They were a faceless, relentless machine that operated purely on legally binding contracts and strict financial deadlines. Call them, I said, my tone absolute. Tell them the property is off market, but it is theirs for $1. $2 million if they close the deal by tomorrow evening. Thomas picked up his phone and dialed the number. A smooth, highly professional voice answered on the second ring. Within seconds, the man enthusiastically confirmed that my property sat squarely inside their prime acquisition zone. The representative sounded eager, however. He cautioned that their typical expedited closing process took a minimum of 7 business days. I shook my head sharply at Thomas. I needed the sale finalized, and the house legally out of my name before the sun rose on Wednesday morning. Thomas held up a finger, gesturing for me to wait. He leaned into the speakerphone, dropping his voice into a firm, unyielding register. 7 days does not work for my client, Thomas told the representative. My client is offering you a prime, highly coveted corner lot, but this is a distressed timeline. You can have the property for $2 million cash, wired fully into our trust account by tomorrow afternoon. But there is a very strict, non-negotiable condition attached to this transfer. I leaned closer to the phone. I am the homeowner, I said, making sure my voice carried authority. I will sign the deed over to your corporation tomorrow. But your company cannot take physical possession of the property. You cannot change the exterior locks, and you cannot step foot on the lawn to begin any demolition work until exactly 10 o'clock in the morning this Wednesday. Not one single minute before. The representative chuckled softly, clearly confused by the strange restriction. That is a highly unusual request, he replied. Usually, sellers want to eagerly stay in the home for at least a month after closing. You are asking us to wait barely 24 hours, but restricting our access down to the exact minute. I stared blankly at the speakerphone. That is the absolute deal, I stated coldly. You get the land you want, I get the cash. But if any of your representatives show up before 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning, the deal is void. Do we have a legally binding agreement? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, the voice returned to the speakerphone. We have an agreement, Mr. Caldwell. The man said, we will successfully draft the cash purchase agreement immediately and send it to your attorney. We will fully respect your strict timeline. Wednesday morning, exactly at 10 a.m., Lana Star Horizon will take full legal and physical possession of the property. I thanked the man, and Thomas firmly ended the call. The trap was officially set. I picked up his gold pen and signed my name. It was bold and final. I stood up from the leather chair, feeling a strange, intoxicating sense of weightlessness. The fortress I built for my family was destined to become a pile of splintered wood. I firmly shook his hand and walked out of his office. The real challenge was just beginning. I had to be the frail, forgetful old man for just a little while longer. Tuesday morning arrived with a suffocating tension. Bradley was busy tightening his silk tie, loudly complaining about traffic. I kept my head down, forcing my hands to tremble slightly as I lifted my spoon. I played the defeated father. By 8:30, they were out the door, leaving me alone in the quiet house. My timeline was tight. The inspector was scheduled to arrive at 1 o'clock, right in the absolute middle of their workday. At 5 minutes to 1, a white commercial pickup truck pulled into the driveway. I met him at the door before he could even ring the bell. He walked through the living room with steps, tapping on his screen. He stared directly at the imported Italian marble dining table and the matching velvet chairs Megan had recently purchased on maxed-out credit. That is some staging furniture, Mr. Caldwell, Marcus noted, glancing around the room at the high-end electronics and designer rugs covering the floor. I assume you have a specialized moving company coming to clear all of this out before we take possession tomorrow morning. Our demolition crews run on a very tight schedule. If this house is not empty, we charge a premium disposal fee. I stood next to the marble table, running my rough hand over the unpaid stone. I looked Marcus directly in the eyes. I have a specialized moving crew arriving early tomorrow morning to take my personal belongings, I explained calmly. However, I want to be clear with you regarding the strict terms of our contract. You are buying this property exactly as it stands. Whatever items I choose to take will be gone by 9:50 in the morning. But any luxury furniture, electronics, or personal belongings that remain inside these walls or on this lawn at exactly 10 o'clock tomorrow morning are legally abandoned. You do not need to call me. You do not need to ask for permission. You treat everything left behind as construction debris. It officially belongs to the developer, and your bulldozers are free to crush it into the dirt. Marcus raised an eyebrow, visibly surprised by the sheer coldness of my instructions. He had probably seen plenty of messy evictions, but a seller voluntarily sacrificing tens of thousands of dollars in luxury furniture was unheard of. He tapped his tablet a few times and nodded firmly. Understood, sir. Whatever is left at 10:00 goes straight into the dumpsters. We walked upstairs so Marcus could visually verify the structural integrity of the roof joists in the attic. It was the rumble of the garage door opening. My blood turned to absolute ice. Bradley and Megan never came home this early. I had less than 10 seconds before she walked right through the mudroom and saw a demolition inspector standing in her hallway in a bright orange safety vest. Panic flared. I pressed a finger firmly to my lips, signaling for absolute silence. I shoved Marcus out the back door, stepping out onto the patio right behind him. I whispered for him to walk around the side of the house and quickly drive away immediately. Marcus gave me a quick nod and jogged toward the side gate, disappearing behind the tall fence. I pulled the patio door shut behind me, my heart hammering. She stopped dead in her tracks, her eyes narrowing suspiciously as she looked at my work boots and the hose firmly in my hand. "What are you doing, Richard?" she demanded. I forced my breathing to slow down, adopting an expression of mild confusion. "I just had the plumber over," I lied. "The sink in the bathroom was leaking again, and I wanted to make sure it was fixed before I leave tomorrow." The master plan had successfully survived. The rest of Tuesday afternoon crawled by with an agonizing slowness. I spent the hours organizing the few personal items I actually cared to keep. That was my entire life condensed into 2 bags. They were just meaningless materials to me now, devoid of any real emotional weight. As the sun dipped below the Texas horizon, painting the sky in deep shades of purple and charcoal, the front door opened and closed. I could hear the loud clinking of wine glasses and the low murmur of Bradley complaining about his boss. But it was Megan's voice that carried the most piercing clarity. She was on a speakerphone call in the living room, talking to one of her superficial, wealthy friends. I could hear every single word she was saying. "I am telling you, it is going to be fabulous." Megan practically squealed into the phone. "The old man is finally moving out tomorrow morning. He is going to some assisted living place across town. Once he is gone, we are going to gut the downstairs. I am throwing a house remodeling party next weekend to celebrate. We are going to totally knock down the wall between the kitchen and the dining room to create a totally open concept space. We are bringing in caterers, and I already ordered a dozen bottles of imported champagne. It is going to be a fresh start for us, a real step up in our social circle." I stood in the dark, a silent smile spreading widely across my face. She was planning a remodeling party. She thought she was going to repaint the kitchen cabinets. The sheer poetic irony of her foolish conversation was almost too delicious to bear. I pulled away from the wooden door and walked back over to my small writing desk in the corner. I reached into my bag and pulled out my secure digital tablet. Thomas had provided it to me earlier that morning to ensure our communications remained encrypted on the home network. I pressed the power button, and the screen brilliantly illuminated my face with a pale blue glow. I opened the highly secure email portal. Right at the top of the inbox was a message from Thomas Sterling, marked with absolute high importance. The subject line read, "Final closing documents for immediate execution." I took a deep, steadying breath and tapped the screen to open the legal file. The purchase price was listed clearly, $1,200,000 payable in a rapid cash wire transfer. I scrolled down to the funding section. The money would cross international borders the exact moment the contract was signed, instantly vanishing into a secure financial fortress, untouchable by my son, his predatory lenders, or any local court system. Now he would not be able to find a single penny, even if he hired a team of private investigators. I reached the final page of the document. I paused for just a fraction of a second. It was the physical manifestation of my entire adult life. They had turned my sanctuary into a disgusting prison of deceit. I placed my finger on the smooth glass of the tablet and traced my signature. A green check mark prominently appeared on the screen, accompanied by a small chime. I looked out the window into the dark Texas night. The sale was finalized. The legal title had been transferred. The property was now the legal asset of a corporate demolition company, and the countdown to absolute destruction had officially begun. The morning sun broke through the curtains, casting a pale gray light over my bedroom. I stood up from my bed, my joints popping in the quiet room, and walked over to the closet. I wanted to look exactly like the defeated, fading old man they so needed me to be. I shuffled over to the corner of the room, where my two battered leather suitcases sat. I gripped the thick handles of my suitcases. I practiced a long, rattling sigh before firmly opening my bedroom door. I dragged the suitcases down the hallway, making sure the hard leather bumped loudly against the wooden stairs. They were practically glowing, with a vibrant excitement. They looked exactly like two people who had just won the lottery, oblivious to the fact that the winning ticket they were excitedly holding was counterfeit. Megan spotted me first. I stood still, fully letting her perfume wash over me, fighting every single instinct in my body that screamed at me to push her away. It was the kind of disgusting hug you give a stray dog before dropping it off at the pound. "It is really for the best, Richard," Megan cooed, stepping back and patting my arm. "You are going to love it at Sunny Pines. You will make so many new friends there, people who can actually keep up with your pace. And do not worry about a single thing here. Bradley and I are going to take wonderful care of the house. We have so many exciting plans to update the space. It will be exactly like a brand new beginning for all of us." I looked down at the floor, forcing my hands to tremble as they rested on the handles of my suitcases. I suppressed the urge to laugh right in her manicured face. In exactly 2 hours, her brand new beginning would involve a team of burly construction workers tearing out the very cabinets she was casually leaning against. I offered her a weak nod, playing my role to absolute perfection. He did not look sad. He looked relieved, like he had just successfully taken out the garbage. He turned to me and clapped his hands together, a sound that echoed loudly in the large kitchen. "Well, Dad," Bradley said, glancing down at the gold watch strapped to his wrist. "Megan and I really got to get to work. I have a morning meeting I cannot miss. The nursing home shuttle is successfully scheduled to pick you up right at 9 o'clock, right?" I kept my head bowed and offered another slow, defeated nod. "Yes," I whispered softly. "The shuttle will be exactly here at 9. I will just wait right here by my bags until they arrive." Bradley smiled a wide, predatory grin that did not reach his eyes. "Good, that is good." The facility director said the transition process is easy. "Just hand them your paperwork when you get there. Oh, wait a second." He paused, reaching into the inside pocket of his tailored suit jacket. He pulled out his leather wallet and flipped it open. I watched him through my lowered eyelashes, wondering what final piece of dialogue he was excitedly preparing to deliver. What he did next was so insulting, so degrading, that it instantly and killed any microscopic shred of mercy that might have accidentally survived in the deepest corners of my heart. He walked over and casually stuffed the money into the front pocket of my faded flannel shirt, giving my chest a light pat. "Here is a little something for you to buy some nice snacks from the vending machine," he said. "A payoff for stealing $1 million house. Have a good life, Dad," he added casually. Then, without a single backward glance, my son and his greedy wife walked out the door, leaving me alone in the kitchen. I firmly listened to the garage door close. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the crisp $200 bill, and smiled a genuine smile. The ultimate destruction could now begin. I stood alone in the absolute silence of the kitchen, the crisp $200 bill resting lightly in the rough palm of my hand. This was the final price tag Bradley had placed on my entire existence. I would use this exact same bill to generously tip the foreman of my moving crew. I turned away from the kitchen island and walked toward the front window. I pulled back the silk curtains and watched their leased luxury car glide down the quiet suburban street until it disappeared. I was the master builder, the undisputed owner of the dirt beneath my boots, and the ultimate architect of their impending ruin. I reached into my trousers, pulled out my smartphone, and dialed the number for the logistics company Thomas had recommended. The time for acting was over, and the time for absolute destruction had arrived. "Bring the trucks," I instructed coldly. By 8:30, the quiet street was awakened by the throaty, aggressive rumble of diesel engines. I walked out the front door, pulled the $200 bill from my pocket, and slapped it onto the foreman's clipboard. "I have a strict deadline today," I told him, my voice carrying the absolute authority of a veteran contractor. "You are not clearing this entire house. You are only taking the specific items I point out to you. If I do not explicitly tell you to pack it, you do not touch it. You do not look at it. You leave it exactly where it sits." I walked them through the house. I explicitly told the movers to walk right past Megan's imported Italian marble dining table. What remained was a hollow, echoing shell, filled with props for a stage play that had just been permanently cancelled. The moving trucks drove away. I dialed the number and informed the recovery agent that I was permanently vacating the property in less than an hour, and if they wanted to secure their unpaid assets before the building was legally demolished, they needed to arrive immediately. At exactly 9:30, two rugged flatbed trucks and an unmarked cargo van pulled into my driveway. They operated with speed, dragging the velvet sectional out the front door and tearing the flat-screen television off the wall, leaving jagged holes in the drywall. I watched them systematically strip away every single layer of Megan's fabricated wealth, exposing the hollow, rotting core of their financial reality. The house was barren. I stood by the front window. The digital clock on the oven shifted to 9:50. At exactly 10 o'clock, Marcus, the lead site assessor for Lonestar Horizon, walked up my front steps holding bolt cutters. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell," he said. "Lonestar Horizon is officially ready to take full physical and legal possession of the property." I reached into my pocket, pulled out my brass key ring, and dropped the metal directly into his palm. "The house is yours," I replied evenly. Marcus immediately blew a whistle. One worker pressed a power drill against the hinges of the solid oak front door, stripping the screws. It was officially an active, hazardous demolition site. I walked out to my waiting hired town car, got inside, and drove away from the demolition site. The suite featured floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of the entire city skyline. I unlocked my battered leather suitcase, pulled out my secure laptop, and opened an encrypted application. The live video feed flared to life in brilliant razor clarity. I poured myself a generous glass of premium bourbon and sat back in my plush leather chair. Lonestar Horizon had dumped the black garbage bags, containing Bradley and Megan's clothes, right onto the dirt pile in the front yard. At exactly 5:45 in the evening, the sleek silver nose of their leased Tesla glided into the video frame. Bradley stepped out onto the pavement, his leather dress shoes slipping in the dirt where the concrete driveway used to be. The white picket fence was shattered. Megan stepped out, holding a vibrant leather handbag. The vibrant leather handbag slipped from her fingers, plummeting to the ground and landing with a thud in the aggressive dirt. Bradley broke into a frantic, highly uncoordinated sprint, charging up the remaining concrete steps of the front porch. It stated that the entire property was an active, restricted construction zone, exclusively owned by Lonestar Horizon. I watched his hands tremble as he peeled the formal corporate eviction notice taped to the plastic. Right at that exact moment, my sleek smartphone began to vibrate. I answered the call, savoring the absolute control I possessed. "Dad, where are you?" Bradley screamed into the receiver, his voice cracking with high-pitched hysteria. "The house is destroyed. They took all of our furniture. There is a crazy construction crew here claiming they own the land." I took a slow, highly satisfying sip of my premium bourbon. "You have not been robbed, Bradley," I replied, my voice smooth and as a sheet of winter ice. "A robbery implies that someone took something that actually legally belonged to you." A highly confused silence followed, broken only by Megan's sobbing in the loud background. "What are you talking about?" Bradley stammered. "You sat at my kitchen island and told me I was no longer safe," I said softly, driving the emotional blade home. "You forged my secure signature on a highly illegal, durable power of attorney so you could steal my equity through a reverse mortgage. You wanted to pay off Megan's $140,000 credit card debt and leave me rotting in a state-run facility." I let out a dark chuckle. "Did you actually think I would let you easily destroy my life?" I picked the lock on the study. "I copied all of your fraudulent paperwork, And then I sold the entire property to a highly demolition company for $2 million in pure cash. You sold it? He gasped, breathless. Yes, I stated. The money is currently safely sitting in an untouchable offshore trust account. You have no house. You have no furniture, because I tipped off your aggressive repo men this morning. You have debts, and you have a highly aggressive forged legal document that will buy you a 10-year prison sentence if you ever try to use it. Dad, please. We have nothing. You wanted a brand new beginning, I whispered coldly. Congratulations, Bradley. You are starting from scratch. I ended the call, blocked his number, and took one final satisfying sip of my beautifully premium bourbon as the sun set on their absolute ruin.